all so much for coming out. It's so interesting actually being in this position now, because I was in their position for so many years. I actually now get to proudly, I guess, consider myself an adult ally more than a youth activist. I aged out last May, handed the organization off 4 days before my 30th birthday, so it was perfect timing. Yeah, so it's been a really incredible journey. It started, I don't know when it started, but basically when I was 12, I discovered that there was pollution happening. It was very simple. I was on the train and my parents were telling me about pollution. And for the first time in my life, I got this sense of there being something wrong in the world, something that could be improved. And I didn't understand why there were pollution, and I wondered if people cared. A couple of years later, we moved to New York, and suddenly I was surrounded in my teenage years by young people who were struggling with their everyday lives. I was beginning to struggle with my own identity, and I saw a lot of kind of hopelessness in the eyes of my peers. And I began to question what was the role of young people in our world, because I was seeing friends get slashed with knives, beaten with lead pipes, and trying to take their own lives. In fact, when I was 15, I almost took my own life. And the question that I grappled with for the next 3 or 4 years was, what kind of world are we living in when young people are taking, young people are taking their own lives? What does that say about the world? And what does that say about any hope for the future when young people are called the hope for the future? So I saw this conflict, and I didn't know what to do, but a few years later, a friend of mine brought me to the UN, a couple blocks away. I was 17, and I was like, holy cow. There are people who care about the world, who are trying to change it. So I was like a kid in a candy store, like, how can I get involved? I'm 17, I want to help, where can I go? And they were like, you need a degree, you need experience, you need this, you need that. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm here, I want to help, where's my role? And they said, well, I was with an NGO in a meeting, and they said, well, we want more young people to get involved, we just don't know how. And I thought to myself, okay, that's it. Here are all my peers, hopeless, frustrated with what's happening in the world, with no voice whatsoever in the process. Here's the UN that's been around for 50 years at this point, trying to create world peace, and have they succeeded? No. No, not even close. So I thought this is a perfect marriage. If the UN was created on these lofty principles, these principles which are inherent in young people are suffering from all these poor decisions made by adults. If we could simply get them involved in the UN, bring all of these positive attributes to bear in decision making, then maybe the UN would actually finally achieve its mission. And young people would stop feeling sorry for themselves, would stop feeling depressed, would stop getting involved in drug abuse, alcohol abuse, violence, gangs, all of these other negative attributes. It seemed to me a perfect marriage. So in 1996, when I was 18, I wrote a proposal suggesting that the UN create a permanent forum, a United Nations Youth Assembly. And off I went. Anybody care to hear my proposal? I went everywhere and anywhere I could. And I started connecting with young people who loved the idea or who had started their own project. This was in 1996, 1997. I'm 19, 20 at this point. What began to happen as I was going around speaking at these different events, I got invited to Taiwan, to Mexico, to all of these places. I started connecting with young people who had, like me, a vision, who wanted to change the world, and either didn't know how or were doing the best they could with whatever information they had. And then I was at a conference in 1999 in Mexico, and I drank the water. Don't drink the water in Mexico. I joke about this because it was the first time in the 3 years since I started the project that I was forced to stop. I got so sick that I stopped, and it gave me the chance to actually look at what I'd done in the last 2.5 years. And as I was connecting with all of these young people, and I realized that it wasn't about my vision. My vision was for this United Nations Youth Assembly, but that was my vision. I had, in the meantime, connected with all of these extraordinary young people, and it's like, wait a minute. First of all, there's a global youth movement out there. How many people knows it exists? Nobody knows. And we all have the same hopes, the same vision. So I gave up on my vision right then and there. And it was actually a couple of months later, and almost 10 years to the date today, it was July 1999, that I organized the first conference. We brought young people from 27 countries together, and we said, what do we want to do? And they all said, we want to create a global youth assembly. And I said, oh, okay, great. Well, kind of got that idea on the table. And they said, what else do we want to do? Well, let's create a network that connects up this global youth movement. And I thought, okay, great, we can do that. We can get started with it. So I raised $50,000. I recruited 2 friends, Jonah and Bramley, who isn't here. Jonah is actually the reason that Jennifer was at that meeting in 2000 in the first place, because he's like, Ben, look at this 8-page spread of this new organization. I was like, holy cow. So anyway, in 1999, we organized the conference. We raised $50,000. At that point, I had already been talking to the UN saying, do you like this idea? Do you like this idea? They were like, go away, kid. Go away. Seriously, that was the answer I got. And I called the project the United Nations Youth Assembly Project, and they had actually had the gall to threaten me with their legal department. They said, you can't use the word United Nations. I'm like, it's a friggin' proposal. If I can't use the name in a proposal, how am I infringing on you guys? You guys missed the point entirely. So what did we do? We opened our office 2 blocks away. 2 blocks away from the UN. And within 2 years, we had started to mobilize over 1 million young people every year in our biggest project, Global Youth Service Day, which we did in partnership with another organization. Within 4 years, we had a network in 180 countries. We had about 12,000 organizations that we had connected. Luis had come on board and basically helped our organization almost double in size. The UN started giving us hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of contract, largely because of Luis's outreach. Jonah went to open our Sao Paulo regional office. Suddenly we had a regional office in Beirut. We had another one in South Africa. We were like everywhere. Anyway, it was incredible. The experience of being part of this network, more than what we managed to accomplish as a network, was really the bonds, the connection, so that young people felt like they had a place in this world, that they had some kind of relevance, that they had a connection with their peers, that they weren't alone in wanting to see the world change, and that they felt it was possible. That was the most important thing. And when I started that project in 1996, I said to myself, even if I don't manage to create this United Nations Youth Assembly, even if I don't manage to create this global, truly global voice of young people, then maybe in the process we would have actually created this network of friends, which in 20, 40, 50 years' time would be those same friends who are the people with their fingers on the trigger, and before launching a bomb, they'd give it thought. They'd give it thought and they'd think, wow, no, wait, I've got friends over there in Iraq. I've got friends in Afghanistan. I've got friends in Pakistan. I've got friends. I can't just drop bombs mindlessly. Anyway, we managed to grow into one of the largest networks ever created of youth organizations. The partnership with Taking It Global was instrumental. One more person to recognize too is John Balance, who's back there. He was one of our first national offices in France, and he's got 2 books that he put together out there. There's so many different things that were done as part of the network.
Actually, buying more profits to GYAN.
But anyway, we continue to grow as an organization. We've continued to be, GYAN and Taking It Global, a cornerstone for the youth movement. The work that we do changes all the time. The importance of it I cannot stress enough. There's nobody else trying to be this connective tissue for what is otherwise a truly global youth movement. There's hundreds of millions of young people. If they're not active, they're trying to get active. If they don't have a voice, they're trying to be heard. And there's so much we can do to support their efforts. So I wrote a piece at the end of last year seeing this economic crisis coming down the pike, and I called it the nonprofit crunch. And I said, basically in this opinion editorial, that we're going to see this massive constriction in philanthropy, and that basically is going to mean a huge loss for the nonprofit sector. And I said those organizations that survive will be those that pool their efforts, that start collaborating, that merge when possible, and that basically create a base of individual donors, because that's ultimately what drives philanthropy. Philanthropy as a whole is constituted somewhere between 85 and 90% by individual donations. So I thank you all so much for buying a ticket today. I encourage you to give a little more if you can, especially if you can, whether it's $10, whether it's $10 a month, whether it's $100, whether it's $1,000. I don't know what you can give. Everybody can give to various extents. But giving is not just your support to the organization. It's expressing your belief that young people have a role to play and that there can be organizations like ours there to support them. And like Louis said, there's some silent auction items at the back, which I encourage you to bid on. It's very good value. You'd be getting things for half the price of that, depending on how generous you want to be. And again, I just want to thank you all for coming. It's such a joy to see you all here. It's such an honor and a privilege to have been part of this movement and to now have that same privilege of being a supportive adult. So thank you, thank you, thank you.